The scene opens with the sound of tires rolling over an empty stretch of dusk-lit pavement and the glint of chrome catching the last rays of daylight. No flashy badges, no roaring crowd, just potential coiled in steel and gasoline waiting to prove a point against expectations that never saw it coming. Imagine a machine built not to follow trends, but to upset them. Not by outspending anyone, but by daring to exist where logic said it shouldn't. Picture designers and engineers pushing a shape that didn't match the era's playbook, carving out space in a landscape already ruled by louder names and deeper pockets. Think about the mindset required to bet on a two-seat performance gamble when everyone else was chasing the same template, and how that risk could either rewrite a company's fate or vanish as a footnote if it missed its mark. If curiosity's already pulling you in, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with what model or year you want covered next. The AMC AMX appears early in the timeline of American performance choices that refuse to blend into the background. Its arrival in 1968 wasn't a cautious entry, but a statement from a company few expected to challenge. Established formulas before it ever reached the showroom floor, the groundwork for its emergence was laid through years of compromise, calculation, and the constant pressure to prove relevance in a marketplace ruled by volume and familiarity. Microstory, a boardroom under stress. Leadership inside a smaller manufacturer faced grim charts that tracked shrinking margins and rising expectations from buyers who wanted muscle without premium pricing. Rather than mimic what others sold in massive numbers, they gambled on a shorter wheelbase and cleaner profile, believing a two-seat layout could stand out without stepping into full luxury territory. Microstory, engineers without excess. The development team worked with limited resources, repurposing platforms and parts where possible, but refusing to compromise the performance ethos, focusing on weight, stance, and engine selection to compete head-on with cars backed by far larger budgets. Microstory, designers seeking identity. Stylists carved out a look that avoided the bloated proportions appearing elsewhere, giving the car visual muscle without unnecessary chrome or decoration, ensuring it looked serious without shouting. They used shape as message rather than gimmick, context digest. The American performance landscape of the late 60s wasn't short on speed or ego, but most offerings were built around the idea that more seats, more length, and bigger marketing budgets drove success. Into that crowded field came a name almost no one expected to deliver a credible threat. Context digest. Buyers were becoming more image-conscious, drawn to high-compression engines and long hood silhouettes. Yet insurance pressures and production costs crept in, forcing companies to balance desirability with pragmatism. A niche two-seater ran directly against the volume logic of the time. Context digest. Racing influence mattered, driving development decisions and public perception. And while some rivals had factory-backed efforts with deep pockets, the AMX had to rely on tactical entries and select partnerships to build credibility. Reflection bridge. The people behind the AMX knew they couldn't equal the output of bigger brands, but they believed distinctiveness could compete with money. That idea shaped every decision moving forward. Reflection bridge. They understood that the car needed to make a statement fast or risk disappearing before the public noticed. From concept to production, each step of the project brought tension between ambition and reality, and yet the finished product emerged with confidence and purpose, setting the stage for how the marketplace and media would react next, leading directly into the factors that turned curiosity into controversy and admiration in equal measure. The AMC AMX enters its second phase of relevance, not by coasting on early intrigue, but by forcing a reassessment of what a smaller manufacturer could accomplish with intent and timing, mentioning the AMX within these. Opening lines underscores how its identity anchored everything that followed. From perception shifts to market reactions. Microstory, a launch that surprised the press. When reviewers first got their hands on the AMX, its proportions and aggressive stance challenged assumptions, and test track results closed the gap between image and reality. Some skeptics softened after witnessing how its power-to-weight balance translated to genuine performance. Microstory, showroom reactions, and dealer realities. Sales staff learned quickly that the AMX drew a different kind of interest. Instead of family buyers trading in sedans, younger enthusiasts appeared with pointed questions about handling, engine options, and customization, forcing dealers to rethink how they pitched value, Microstory, track appearances with intent. Racing teams that partnered with the AMX saw potential in its lighter frame and solid engines. Small victories and headline appearances gave the model legitimacy beyond advertising claims, building a reputation unthinkable before its debut. Context Digest. Competing options from larger companies offered more body styles, extensive trim packages, and expansive dealer networks, making the AMX seem like an outlier. Yet its uniqueness became leverage rather than a liability. As word spread that performance didn't require scale, Context Digest. Financial constraints shaped how marketing dollars were spent, meaning clever placement and strategic partnerships had to replace broad campaigns. This created targeted influence that caught enthusiasts off guard. Context Digest. Regulatory changes on the horizon and rising insurance premiums were starting to squeeze the broader performance market. And the AMX's focused design sidestepped some costs while still delivering thrills. Reflection Bridge. Lean production and tactical promotion allowed the AMX to punch above its weight without pretending to be something it wasn't. Reflection Bridge. The question looming wasn't whether it could compete, but whether it could endure under mounting pressures from shifting trends. As the model carved its identity deeper into the culture of late 60s performance, the real test approached in the form of sustainability, perception, and legacy, pointing directly toward the forces that would determine whether its momentum could survive the decade and define what came next. The AMC AMX steps into its most defining stretch as expectations collide with economic and cultural realities that could either solidify its legacy or erase it from memory. Using the AMX name early, here grounds the final arc in its lived experience rather than speculation. Micro-story, shifting buyer priorities. As the muscle era peaked and began to bend under insurance costs and changing tastes, the AMX faced consumers who still admired speed but increasingly demanded practicality, forcing tough internal conversations about identity and adaptability. Micro-story, internal recalibration. Leadership weighed keeping the AMX as a pure two-seater against modifying strategy to capture broader sales. Engineers and designers looked at the balance between performance pedigree and financial survival. Knowing missteps could end the lineup entirely, micro-story, enthusiast ownership emerges. Those who bought the AMX often formed tight-knit followings, customizing and preserving their cars as symbols of individuality, giving the model cultural strength beyond showroom numbers. Context Digest. Industry changes hit smaller manufacturers harder, with rising production costs, regulatory torque, and consumer shifts toward multi-seat versatility. Models like the AMX had to justify existence in a field where conformity began to dominate. Context Digest. Motorsport relevance continued to matter, but budgets and priorities made long-term campaigns difficult, meaning the AMX had to rely on early wins and word-of-mouth credibility. Context Digest. Perception became as valuable as profit. And while the AMX didn't lead sales charts, it generated curiosity that influenced how performance cars from modest origins were viewed. Reflection Bridge. The momentum built by its bold entry met the reality of a narrowing path for niche performance models. Reflection Bridge. What remained to be seen was how its brief run would echo after production shifted away from the original concept. From reputation to collectability, from racing memories to restoration circles, the AMX transitioned from market contender to cultural reference point, setting up the closing perspective that ties its journey to ownership, nostalgia, and long-term influence. The AMC AMX stands as a case study in how ambition, timing, and distinct identity can outlive production numbers and corporate limitations, and naming the AMX within these first words keeps the reflection anchored to the model's journey. Its story resonates with U.S. buyers and enthusiasts because it represents a moment when a company chose boldness over imitation, crafting a two-seat performance machine when the rest of the market leaned on scale and conservatism. Ownership today carries a mix of pride and practicality as parts sourcing, restoration costs, and the rarity of original examples shape real-world involvement. Yet that scarcity adds to its mystique and collector appeal. Modern drivers who find themselves behind its wheel often talk about presence rather than convenience, about how the short wheelbase and muscle-forward stance create a connection lost in many larger or tech-heavy vehicles. Despite not matching the sales impact of broader performance lines, its influence shows in how niche models can command attention, shift perception, and inspire future builds that prioritize identity over mass volume. Culturally, the AMX carved out respect because it never pretended to outgun giants through spending or size. It chose authenticity, And that authenticity helped preserve its legacy even when production stopped or evolved into different formats. Its blueprint can be seen in later efforts by manufacturers, who understand that standing out sometimes matters more than blending in, especially when enthusiast markets crave originality. Collectors and historians often point to that combination of short production run, focused design, and racing credibility as the formula that turned a high-risk introduction into an enduring talking point. Those evaluating the model's place in American performance history see a reminder that risk can generate legacy, even if it doesn't guarantee long-term volume. And that underdog status can become an advantage when it sparks curiosity and loyalty. Ownership in the current era comes with trade-offs: maintaining originality, preserving drivability, and finding knowledgeable mechanics. Yet those challenges contribute to the sense of accomplishment and pride. Future generations looking back will find an example of how reducing seats, streamlining design, and challenging norms produced something that remained relevant to enthusiasts. Long after the last unit rolled off the line, what lingers longest is not the production numbers, but the decision to create something unexpected in a crowded era. And that decision gave American automotive culture one of its most distinctive performance icons. When the dust settles, the closing truth is simple. If every company played it safe, the landscape would look uniform and forgettable. But one daring approach in 1968 ensured a lasting chapter that still turns heads and sparks admiration.